the information about it. But more generally, there is a growing concern about corrosive anti-Semitism, which is seeping into society. And we have to nip it in the bud.
The theatre says Mr Curry won't appear again. He is yet to comment. Labour's insisted it takes reports of anti-Semitism seriously in every case after the suspension of another parliamentary candidate. Graham Jones, who was set to stand in Hyndburn in Lancashire, reportedly said UK citizens fighting for Israeli forces should be locked up. It follows the withdrawal of support for Azhar Ali in the Rochdale by-election. Official figures show inflation was at 4% in January, the same rate as in December. Forecasters had expected a slight rise in the Consumer Prices Index. Grant Fitzner is Chief Economist at the Office for National Statistics.
Although there was the widely expected increase in the Ofgem energy cap that kicked in January, there are a number of offsetting factors. So, for example, the price of furniture and household goods fell more than a year ago. Food prices fell on the month. For the first time in over 2 years, so we're seeing that annual increase in food prices continue to come down. And basically those factors offset each other.
The British Retail Consortium says there has been a woefully inadequate action to address crime in the sector. Its annual survey found a record loss of £1.8 billion to shop theft and more than 1,300 incidents of violence and abuse every day. Ministers say they are bringing together police and businesses to tackle retail crime. And around 3,000 Deliveroo and Uber Eats riders could go on strike this evening on Valentine's Day. Delivery Job UK is calling for better pay and conditions, but the firms say the majority of workers are happy with their roles. In the city, the FTSE 100 a short time ago was up 33 at 75.45. The pound buys $1.26 and the euro 17. LBC weather, most places mild and cloudy with some rain later. Brighter spells in eastern England, a high of 14 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Thomas Watt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Good morning, 3 minutes after 9, Wednesday, the 14th of February. Not quite weeks to go, still a couple of months, but Londoners will get their opportunity to vote for a politician who will enjoy the third biggest political mandate in the whole of Europe. It's the post of Mayor of London. Now, you've heard from the incumbent, the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, who declines to come on this show. And you've heard from the Conservative candidate, Susan Hall, who is good enough to come in on this show, despite, somebody would say, perhaps having a bit of a tough time of it. So it's great to welcome the three other prime of the other candidates for their opportunity to take your calls. I'll introduce them in no particular order because they'll all be going in an order specifically in a moment. But we welcome Councillor Zoe Garbett, who is the Green Party candidate, Rob Blackie, who's with the Liberal Democrats, and Howard Cox, who's with Reform UK. While you were listening to the news, I asked the three candidates a simple question, and that would determine who would go first, with about 30 seconds to say what they think they have to offer London. And the question was, in which year was Sir Joseph Bazalgette's sewage system completed, according to the Museum of London? Completed is the key. Now, many of you will know, some of you might even have been around. It was opened in 1865 by Edward, Prince of Wales. It was actually completed by, and I have to tell you, one of them got this absolutely correct, 1875. So Rob Blackie will be going first because you got it absolutely correct. Howard Cox will be going second. He was in the 1890s. Councillor Zoe decided that she would not enter a vote or a guess because I think she might have been a little bit flawed by the question. So, in that order, 30 seconds from each of you. I won't be rude and interrupt you, but if you hear me gently coughing or muttering, perhaps we can move on, and then we'll be coming to the first call, which is going to be Milad. So stand by, Milad, coming to you in about a minute and a bit. Rob Blackie for the Liberal Democrats, what would make you the best candidate to be the Mayor of London? And thank you for coming to the studio.
Thank you for having me. Londoners are feeling let down by Sadiq Khan. I go around London every week and people tell me they're feeling worried. That it might be a stabbing that happens nearby, or it might be a car being broken into on their street. And after 8 years of Sadiq Khan as mayor, the Met is in a mess. We have a situation last year where in the Casey report into the Met, a serving police officer says that their rate of convicting rapists and people who do sexual assaults is so bad that it may as well be legal in London. Okay. As Liberal Democrat Mayor, it'll be my top priority to fix the Met.
Thank you for coming in. Bang on 30 seconds. I'm grateful. Howard Cox, why would you make a good mayor?
Well, Nick, as you know full well, I've been on your show a few times talking about the cost of motoring, and I've been doing that for 15 years and managed to stop £200 billion of planned tax rises. I'm the only candidate that's actually got a track record of actually achieving something. And what I want to do is actually to get rid of this disgustingly dishonest mayor from actually dictating policy based on basically emotion and lies. And starting three things I'm talking about. Obviously, ULEZ, I'm going to get rid of all of it. And secondly, quite right, we're always right about the police. That's a major thing. And finally, the last thing is all affordable housing.
Howard, thank you for that. And finally to you, Councillor, local councillor, of course, in the Borough of Hackney, just to explain why I address you as Councillor Zoe Garbett. Zoe, why would you make the best candidate?
So I've got 10 years of experience working in the NHS and in the public sector, so I really understand what's needed to get London working again. I've got a lot of experience working with people, listening to people, acting on what they say, addressing inequality and acting on injustice. I am a councillor, I got the highest Green vote in London, and I stand for a fairer, greener, safer city with more affordable transport and better quality housing for everyone. London needs a new direction, which is why I'm standing to be the Mayor of London.
All right, thank you for that. Before we go to the questions, Rob Blackie, how did you know it was 1875? That the sewage system was completed?
I didn't, but I did read a fantastic book about the spread of cholera in the 19th century, which touched on the building of it. So I was staggered. I got lucky.
I was staggered when I saw that come through. Right, to the first question. Milad is in Chiswick, and let's go in the reverse order now. So it's going to come first to you, Councillor Zoe Garbett. Milad in Chiswick. Go. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I just want to ask the candidates what their views are on the legalisation of drugs.
Legalisation of drugs. Stay on the line. We might bring you back. Zoe Garbett, let's start with you.
Thank you, Milad. This is a really, really important question, something I'm incredibly passionate about and have got years of working on. So I worked on the Green Party's drug policy because I think the war on drugs has absolutely failed. Death by drug overdose is increasing. Approach currently is absolutely not working. We see the use of drug policing, over-policing black communities in London. That's a real issue for Londoners. I think that drugs need to be completely legalised and regulated and moved into the hands...
not decriminalised.
Yeah, legalised and moved into the hands of health professionals. So you'd have a system that based on the harm of drugs would correlate to how they are accessed. So the most harmful drugs would be accessed through a GP or a pharmacy, down to legalised sales and regulated sales. Because we've currently got a system...
Where would you buy your drug? Where would one buy one's drugs?
Well, we'd have a whole system of where the harmful drugs would be only in the hands of health professionals, so you would only be able to get them on prescription. And those drugs that are seen to be less harmful, that could be managed... You know, our current supply is incredibly dangerous because it is illegal. So they would be regulated and we'd know what was in the substances and people would get health advice and be able to take them in a protected, safe environment.
Lastly, where will the dealers go? We're talking about a multi-million pound industry. They're not going to walk away. What will happen with them?
It wouldn't happen overnight. And you've got some real great examples of places like America where you've worked around the people who are most harmed by the drug trade being kind of supported into the kind of legalised cannabis market, so they're able to kind of get those licenses to grow, and people would be supported through a kind of just transition. It would take a long time. It wouldn't happen overnight.
Rob Blackie for the Lib Dems. I've been reading some of your background. This is a policy that actually you've been looking at already prior to that question from Milad.
Yeah, thank you, Milad. The police stop and search tens of thousands of people every year searching for cannabis, and this is a tremendous waste of police time. We know that the police are completely...
Why is it a waste of police time to try and find someone who's breaking the law?
Because there are things that matter a lot more. You see, right now, crimes like rape and sexual assaults are not getting the attention they deserve. Things like shoplifting. If you call for police to a shoplifting incident, it takes the police 2 hours to arrive. They could be using their time better, not spending that time there, not going to court with them, not taking people to a station for arrest, all of that sort of stuff.
Decriminalise or legalise? Which way would you go?
Well, it's not in the power of a mayor to do that. What is in the power of a mayor is to tell the police to prioritise the crimes that matter. And Londoners agree with me on this.
How do you know?
Well, there's been polling on this that shows it's been public polling, not by me, but by YouGov.
Okay.
And they say they just want police spending their time on what matters most to them.
All right. Okay, Howard.
Well, my dim distant past, I was a pharmacologist. You would understand that as well. So I knew about how drugs actually work. And I've seen the actual damage these drugs have done in terms of actually neurosis, in the paranoia, all these sorts of things. And coming from the driving campaigning fraternity, I've also seen this, not just alcohol, but drugs which can't be detected when people are driving, all these sorts of things. So I wouldn't legalise it. I wouldn't decriminalise it. I would increase the power of the police. And I would also increase stop and search.
What powers? Okay, what powers don't they have that you would give to them, Howard Cox?
Well, I think the powers is perhaps the wrong word. I just want more police.
Well, you said it. You said
I said it, and I'm making the point is I want more people doing it, actually stopping it. And you asked a question just now to Zoe about what would happen to the dealers, etc., and those sorts of things. I want much more focus on that. It's a bit like the boats, people coming across the channel. We should focus on the people actually behind these issues.
As you've mentioned stop and search, lastly, before we take the next call, why? I assume you're a fan of it then, if you want to increase it.
Fan is the wrong word, but
it causes division in some communities.
Yeah, but we've got a mayor that's caused division in massive communities.
Let's talk about your ideas.
I want to go do stop and search because I want to stop this knife crime, and there's terrible things that are going on at the moment. Violent crime is up by 40%.
Even though it upsets some communities, you would carry on with that?
Well, I'm sorry, I would bring the communities on side and discuss it with them, how we make it work.
So it's also doubled under Sadiq Khan. So stop and search has doubled under Sadiq Khan, and we've seen an increase in crime. So it shows that it doesn't work.
What do you want the police not to do?
Rob Blackie from the Lib Dems. Let's just ask you: Would you agree in increasing stop and search? Would you keep it the level it is?
I think stop and search for cannabis, which is 2/3 of the total, is a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
And what it does is it damages relationships with people. I don't know who here has ever been stop and searched, but the chances of you feeling positive after it aren't so good. That means you're less likely to share intelligence with the police. Good police want that intelligence so they can take knives off the streets.
Would you seek to cut the number of stops?
Yes, absolutely. So that we can rebuild.
You would still keep it as a tactic, but you would reduce.
Well, keep it for important things, but not for cannabis, which is a waste of time.
Zoe Garbutt?
I agree. I think stop and search is incredibly damaging. I always stop and witness. I see multiple young black people being stopped and searched in Hackney, and it's incredibly dehumanising. We know that it's incredibly traumatising for young people. And as Rob said, it breaks that trust with the police, so people don't report crimes to the police, and therefore crimes aren't being looked into.
Let's go to the next caller. Angela's in Richmond. Angela, you're through to the three candidates. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Hello.
Do you agree with the ideology and methodology of Just Stop Oil? And what, as Mayor of London, would you do to minimise and mitigate the disruption caused to ordinary Londoners?
I'm going to start again with Councillor Zoe Garbutt, who's the Green Party candidate. I will, because with three it's perhaps difficult. So, Green Party you've taken part in some demonstrations on these lines, I understand. Is that correct?
I've supported, XR and Just Stop Oil in the past and gone on the peaceful protest because I absolutely agree with people's right to peacefully protest. You need to look at the reasons why people are protesting. People are protesting because they don't think there's enough action being taken on the climate emergency. And as the Mayor of London, that would be my top priority, listening to Londoners and making sure that as Mayor you're taking as much action.
The climate would be your top priority, just to clarify.
For Greens, climate is part of every decision. Sure. It's not a top priority, it's part of everything that we do.
Do you support people sitting down on a bridge or in the high street?
I think if they've got a point to make and they're doing it in a peaceful way, it's something that's important, part of our democracy.
Isn't it? I mean,
peaceful
and non-violent.
Peaceful
action, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you need to look at why people are doing it. People are doing it because they don't feel heard. They've used democratic processes, they've used the right to vote, and they don't feel like there's action.
Can you throw soup over a painting? I don't mean can you do it personally, but would you support those sort of actions?
I think you need to look at if it's peaceful and non-violent.
You can throw soup over paintings, okay. Can you glue yourself to the offices of an oil company?
I mean, I think it's about being peaceful and seeing if it's a non-violent, peaceful protest, and then looking. It's looking at the reasons why people are doing it and making. We are in a climate crisis and not enough action's being taken.
Howard Cox, would you glue yourself to the front of BP? Would you throw soup over an Andy Warhol painting? Would you sit in the middle of Victoria Bridge?
I think you know the answer to this one. There's absolutely no bloody way would I do anything like that. It's disgusting. These protests have happened. All of them, these particular green environmental groups, actually impacting other people's lives, going to work, doing all the things that they need to do. I'm all for a proper, private. Peaceful process, but not impact.
Sorry, what's private? Well, what's the point of a private protest?
Okay, the private thing is actually
a petition, I think.
No, and you can laugh as much as you like, Zoe, but I know people that can't get to work, couldn't get to medical appointments. I'm talking about they can privately. It's probably the wrong word, but off the roads,
So organised demo in Westminster Green or some on Parliament Square.
Exactly, organised and
the point of protest is that it's disruptive.
No, what? No. It doesn't have to be disruptive. You use objective evidence. I've not won one protest in 15 years to keep fuel duty frozen for 15 years.
Howard Cox's Reform UK. Let's go to Rob Blackie, Lib Dem candidate. Rob, your question.
I've worked on environmental issues my whole career, from conservation of elephants in Africa to climate change for most of the last 20 years. So you'd expect me to be sympathetic, but actually I think Just Stop Oil are completely counterproductive. We have to make environmentalism for everybody, and we've got to make it seem cool and aspirational. And I think there's been a great success in recent years, which is how many people want to buy a Tesla. That has actually made electric cars, rather than being a slightly nerdy, weird thing you do, it's a bit painful, has actually been a car that people buy to show off. And I think more environmentalism is something cool and aspirational, the more we'll all want to get on board for it.
So to Angela's lastly on this then, Rob Blackie for the Lib Dems, to Angela's specific point, you don't support the motives, their current protest motives.
I think they're counterproductive because I think they turn people off, and I don't think that helps.
Thank you for that. Hassan in Kensington, you're through to the three candidates. Go ahead, Hassan.
Hello. Yes. Hi, everyone. There are, every few weeks, there are anti-war protests in London. As mayor, would you ban them or join them?
Is this, just to clarify, is this post-October 7th? Is this Israel-Hamas conflict? It is. OK. Let's start with Rob Blackie with this one. Your view of those demonstrations. And Hassan saying what do you think? Sorry, Hassan, do you think they should be banned? Is that what you said?
No, I don't think they should be banned. I'm just asking whether they should do nothing, ban them, or join them.
OK. Well, OK. Would you join in, ban or do nothing? Rob Blackie.
Thank you. I think it's very important people have a right to protest. And that obviously people have very deep feelings on this issue. Completely understand that. So the mayor doesn't actually have the ability to ban them.
Well, you could talk to the chief of the commissioner of police.
You could do, but they're very limited in reality. But I don't think it should ban. No, because I think people should be able to protest as long as they do it within the law.
Okay.
The police have a difficult job to do there, but on the whole, I think the police are doing a good job within the constraints they have.
Chanting from the river to the sea?
Well, people shouldn't be breaking the law, and I think if it's something like that, that is obviously going over the line, or a lot of people would say it was.
So the police should take action on that?
I think it's up to them to make the decision of what's appropriate in the circumstances, because they have a tricky policing decision to make, but they have to enforce the law, and that's their job.
Zoe Garbutt, have you attended any of those demonstrations?
Yeah, I've attended those in central London, as well as supporting my constituents who feel incredibly passionate about this issue. I was out last night with people on the steps of the town hall who were just coming together to show solidarity with each other, to, people from all different kind of ethnicities, religions, backgrounds, joining together to show solidarity.
What was the umbrella for it? Was it pro-Palestine? Was it pro-peace?
Last night was to call attention to the potential attacks in Rafah, but also to call for the council to divest from its pension funds. So I think these protests are, again, people really drawing attention to something they're really not happy about. We know that over 75% of people in the country support a ceasefire, and I think it's people demonstrating that and wanting our politicians to reflect the views of the citizens. And
the current policing tactics, as we've witnessed on the streets of the demos since October, have they got it right? Have they been too heavy-handed? How would you rate their performance?
I couldn't comment on absolutely every aspect. I think they've had to take a measured approach and are trying to keep people safe. But I know there has been some incidences where, they have had to kind of act and maybe being heavy-handed. But I think it's really important to keep it focused on keeping communities safe, because I know that lots of Jewish and Muslim residents currently don't feel safe, so it's important to be tackling hate crime.
Howard Cox and Reform UK, your view of those demos, pro-Palestinian weekend demos?
Well, I've been to both of them. I went to the 100,000 supporting the Jewish and stopping the anti-Semitic attacks, and there wasn't one hate word I heard in that. I was there all day. But I stood in Park Lane when they came down Park Lane. I was at another meeting and there was a Palestinian rally, and all I heard was hate crime. And that's the problem with it. There's a common theme here about the police not having enough power, and we need to actually work with the commission.
They don't have enough power. It's very difficult in a demonstration unless you have thousands of spare police.
Well, but this is the point, though. We've got to give the police the tools they need to stop hate crime. Well, get them from behind the desk, stop policing tweets and things like that. They should come out.
How many police
at any one stage, really? At any one time, there's only 5% of bobbies are actually walking the beat.
Howard Cox, you would want more robust policing of these demonstrations?
Absolutely right.
OK. On a related theme, you are probably aware that a case went before the Westminster Magistrates Court yesterday, and 3 people were found guilty of a low-level terror offence of having a paraglider symbol on the back of their tunics. They, however, have only been given suspended sentences. It could have attracted a term of 6 months. They got suspended sentences for a terror offence. Too light, Zoe Garbutt?
I think the quote from the judge was that there was no actual evidence of their association with Hamas, so I think it was down to the judge to make that decision.
Rob Blackie?
It's down to the judge, but I think you can be obnoxious, and I think that's allowed under free speech. And we have to admit that is something that's obnoxious, shading into criminal.
Howard Cox from Reform UK, too lenient?
Definitely too lenient. This should be custodial.
All right, let's move to the next question. Jason, where are you? Marylebone. Jason, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to ask what their view is on the crippling, what it's like driving in London at the moment with the congestion charge ULEZ. I paid nearly £7 an hour to park in Westminster yesterday.
So you've got congestion charge, you've got ULEZ, you've got very high parking costs, which if you drive a certain type of vehicle is even loaded on that. Obviously, we're going to come first to Howard Cox of Reform UK. Howard Cox.
Well, there is both nationally and in London, considerable anti-car, anti-driver policies. They've been developing for the last 20 years. That's why I've got into actually supporting them. And it's totally wrong. It's based on a premise, an idealism, a virtual signalling green agenda. When, for example, in terms of extending the ULEZ extension down to the M25, even TfL and the Imperial College, when they're not being bribed by the vice or the deputy mayor to actually change the results, there's no
What proof have you got of any bribery, Howard Cox?
Well, the bribery is not financial. They've said they would. Imperial College were asked to do a study to find out whether ULEZ extension would actually improve the air quality. They came back, no, it doesn't, and they were disappointed. So the deputy mayor, I think it's Shirley Gonzalez.
Well, you should know.
Well, okay. I don't necessarily need to know that, Nick. But she actually asked them to change it because it doesn't fit in with their agenda.
I think if you're accusing someone of bribery, it's a good idea to know who you're talking about, Howard Cox, isn't it? All right.
Well, look, ULEZ does not work. All it is a cash grab on the poorest and also small business, and it's ruining London.
Green candidate Zoe Garbutt.
Thanks, Jason. I think your question really speaks to the heart of fairness. And what I hear a lot from Londoners is about making sure that we've got a fair system so that people are able to make the choices, to have choices in the way that they get around. Because currently it's incredibly expensive to get around our city. I think it's up to about £9.80 to make a single journey in some instances on the public transport network. And that's what I really want to focus on, making it more affordable.
Hang on, the call, with respect, that might be what you want to focus on. Jason wants to know about what you would do for motorists. Would you keep all the current policies?
I think it's about looking at the alternatives and making sure that people have those alternatives. When ULEZ was brought in, current
would you
mayor...
keep the current policies, is what the question is, respectfully.
I'd look at...
Especially when they don't work.
I'd look at listening to Londoners and making sure that our out-of-date congestion charge is overviewed, looking at how we make a fairer charging system.
Overviewed with a view to scrapping it, reducing it, doubling it with a view to...
Scrapping it and probably moving towards a smarter, fairer road charging system.
Such as pay per mile?
But it would have to be consulted on with residents to make sure it was fair. But what I think the failure of ULEZ has been not making sure that people had those alternatives earlier on. Like we would have looked at bringing in public transport and making sure that people were able to have other options to get around the city that are more affordable
but you admit
and
the ULEZ
reliable.
is a failure. You just said it.
No, I don't think I said one of the failings of ULEZ. I have supported the ULEZ.
The Lib Dems, Rob Blackie, to the more broader point, which was Jason's question for motorists. I think he used the word crippling for motorists in London.
What he's touched on, of course, is that we've now got this very confusing patchwork system for drivers in London. I think a key thing we've got to do is incentivise people to have green behaviours. And I think, as I mentioned with electric cars earlier, we've had a very successful system of encouraging people into electric cars.
You're a care worker living in Orpington. You can just about afford to keep a Ford Fiesta on the road to do your work. How the hell are you going to get him or her in a Tesla?
Well, I'm not saying get them in a Tesla, but I'm saying we've got to make it easier for them to...
What is encouraging green behaviours?
We've got to make it easier for people to transition.
OK, so how are you going to get him or her into an electric car? They can just about keep the Ford on the road.
Even a hybrid actually would do pretty much the job.
Do you know how much they cost?
I have one myself.
Well,
they're getting cheaper.
This care worker in Orpington can't afford it.
No, absolutely, I entirely understand that. And that's why we've got to help people make that transition. And that's, I think, where the mayor has been very bad. To bring in ULEZ so quickly, that made it harder for people to make the transition. I had to do that myself, actually, when I discovered in the previous set of ULEZ that my car wasn't compliant. But because I had 2 years to adapt, it was not a problem for me. It's much easier if people have time to make that
quick response from Howard.
There is absolutely no need to do a transition. In the last 15 years, HGV vehicles have halved their emissions, but we don't get that headline. Those are the sorts of things we should be doing, is incentivising clean fuel technology, not punishing them in the pocket.
Final point on this before we move on, Howard Cox, you've just blown a massive hole in your budget. If you do away with ULEZ, if you do away with congestion charge, how are you going to replace the money?
Well, for a start, how much it costs to actually fund it. It breaks even. When I walk in on the first day, ULEZ is go bye-bye. It's going. All the staff would go. And you're
going to have to pay them off.
Well, yes, it would be, but that comes out of capital long term. In terms of, we can talk about balance sheets and profit and loss, but it's got to go because we've got to bring people back. Well, I'm the only candidate that was actually commissioned research to show that ULEZ has cost £1 billion to the GDP of London.
And Silvertown Tunnels cost £2 billion. So.
And let's move on to another key issue. Dan in Boreham Wood, just outside. Your question. Good morning.
Hello. Hi. Yes. Homelessness. I realise that the cost of getting a room for the night, if you end up getting a room every night, is the same as renting a place. It's so expensive and people are on the streets, and I'm wondering what you intend to do about something that seems to not be that expensive to solve.
Let's let Rob Blackie from the Lib Dem start this off.
We have a real housing crisis in London right now. It is absolutely appalling. And I talked to a young man in Southwark the other day who just had his rent put up by 50%. And that sort of increase is now quite common. And that's now the leading cause of homelessness. And the root of this is we're not building enough housing. We need to build hugely more housing in London.
How are you going to do that?
And nationally. We've got to free up the land that London government has. We've got to work with national government to make it easier.
But they're failing as well.
Well, right now, for instance, thousands of houses in London are held up because the government has made a change in regulations saying you need 2 staircases in a block. They won't actually clarify for which blocks that means.
But is that a safety issue?
It is meant to be a safety issue.
So you build unsafe housing?
Done with good intentions. But they've made it unclear so people don't know whether or not they need to. So they're spending months talking to lawyers about, well, does this block need a staircase or not? We need to build more housing quickly. If we don't build more housing overall, and the mayor's failed his targets horribly here, we're going to continue to have this problem.
All right, Zoe Garbutt.
Thank you for bringing this really important issue here, because we know that over a half of the country's over 180,000 children who are homeless are in London. I think that's an absolute tragedy and a real sign of a failing system. I say that we're absolutely beyond a housing crisis. I'm a private renter myself and I'm a councillor, and this is the top issue that people bring to me, from damp, cold, mouldy homes to, the overcrowding or being priced out. In the pandemic, we saw that we were able to bring everyone into safe, comfortable, secure housing that were on the streets, and that's something that I think we should be looking at, how we make sure we provide that housing. But also, I think there's loads the Mayor can do within the London plan to hold developers to account to get the housing that we need. And I've been talking about a rent commission to make sure that we're putting that evidence to government for rent controls to make sure that we are bringing those rents down.
All right. If you were to pursue that, of course, it's going to mean that these homes have to be found. How would you actually stimulate builders to build them?
So we talk about also looking at the stock that we've already got. There's, we've done, the Greens in City Hall have pushed for a buy the supply model, which is where we buy the stock back. We've lost loads of homes through right to buy. We've lost over 250,000 homes in London.
Well,
so we need to look at
more houses.
Yeah, but it's looking at not demolishing the ones that we've already got and also buying back those that we've lost. So we look at a kind of green alternative option. And then if you do build them, making sure that more of them are affordable within those blocks.
Zoe, thank you. Let's go to Howard Cox for Reform UK. Just before you give your response, do you agree, Suella Braverman said homelessness was a lifestyle choice. Would you agree with the former Home Secretary?
I thought I would get something like that sort of thing. I sympathise with the point, but I think it's rather indelicately put.
What would you do about the homeless issue in London?
Well, I think we agree on this one. I mean, we're right across the board here. One of the things is planning is a problem. Planning is so slow. We need to break that issue. And the biggest owners, and you alluded to it, the biggest owners of land in London are TfL and the Greater London Assembly. So, the mayorship already owns the land. What we need to do is work with developers to some sort of deal where we do community housing, build thing. I think you were talking about building separate towns within a thing, which I actually thought was a clever idea. I'm talking about Rob Blackie here, by the way, for people not hearing. Yeah. The simple thing here is at the moment we've got to work together with these developers. But my daughter's a classic example. She earns a great salary. She drives a 40-ton articulated truck. She earns 50 grand a year. It's great, but she can't afford to rent. She lives in Orpington. You brought up Orpington there, and she's paying sort of £1,500 a month rent. And you imagine what mortgage you could get with that if she was allowed to do it.
We've also got nurses who aren't able to take up training positions in London, so we're losing the workers that we need as well.
We're coming close to 1:30. If you can hold on for another couple of minutes, I'd like to go to at least one more question, if that's okay. There's no meetings you have to attend. Okay, thank you, Dan, for that question. Lucy in Muswell Hill. Lucy, your question. Morning to you.
Good morning to you, Nick.
My question is, when everyone is suffering with the cost of living crisis, travel costs keep increasing. What do they intend to do with the tube and bus fares.
OK, let's go to Howard Cox from Reform UK. I know you're very motivated by being there for the motorists, but obviously some people choose to travel by bus or by tube. What would your plans include?
It may be surprising, and it's not possible, but I would like to adopt free public transport. Those are the sort of things.
What would that cost?
It's ridiculous. It's a dream coming through. I have this dream.
Well, that dream shat. How much is the cost, Rob?
£10 billion.
Right. OK. So I think that shatters.
Look, I'm trying to make the point. World. But I'm making the point to you, Nick. I'm not anti-public transport. I'm a great believer in public transport. I use it all the time in London. I think it's fantastic. But we're blessed in London. We're across the country, isn't it? And rural areas, particularly in heading to London, heading towards the M25, people don't have the public transport. They don't have that sort of thing. So we need to incentivise people to get onto public transport. It's safe. It's all those.
How would you do that?
We've got to have. Well, one of the things that I want to do is have more policing. I'm sorry, I'm bringing that sort of thing. So we have more transport police, etc. So people feel safe on it.
Do you think people don't use the bus or tubes because of a safety issue?
I know of a lot of them do. A lot of young people I talk to. And the other thing also in the tube, for example, as you know, this ULEZ thing. Bear with me on this. In the tube, it's 2,000% more particulates than there is at roadside level. We need to actually do something about actually making the environment better. I travelled in Moscow many moons ago on their underground. They have massive air conditioning plants.
Right.
Why are we not making it nicer?
All right, let's come to you, Zoe. You did touch actually on public transport in an earlier question. Just reprise a little of what you said, if you would.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. I really do appreciate this question because transport is completely unaffordable for lots of people and it needs to be brought down and we need to address that. Things I've been talking about are, freezing and bringing down bus fares, looking at how we can offer discounts to people who really need them. So that's bringing back the pre-9 a.m. travel for older people. So people over 60 who've had that taken away, they can be carers and people trying to get to health appointments. And also extending the free travel for young people from 18 to 22 and just making sure that people can get around, but also making sure that the system's more reliable. So people are paying into it. We need to make sure that it's giving them a really good service.
All right. OK. Rob, thank you. Rob Blackie, public transport.
We absolutely have to try and do what we can do to keep fares down, but that means Transport for London being run sustainably. And the mayor has been terrible at that. When he first came in, he did a cut to the fares that are really only used by tourists, single fares. He mismanaged the delivery of Elizabeth Line, but lost hundreds of millions because of that. And then when COVID came along, Transport for London was in a huge crisis, and he's gone through his rounds of negotiation with national government that have led to huge bus cuts, and that means TfL is in a mess. We've got to get some stability there, not trying to pretend that we can give it all away for free, because that money has to come from somewhere.
Last couple of questions from me, and we'll go around the three candidates, and thank you. We've been talking a little bit about the people convicted of a terror offence. Also, we learned earlier this week that two Jewish theatre goers were hounded out of the Soho Theatre just around the corner from where our studios are after a comedian unveiled a Palestinian flag and asked them why they refused to clap. How concerned are you that it took the media to break that story? And indeed, how concerned are you with anti-Semitism in London? Can I start with you, Councillor?
So I hear from lots of residents about the increase in hate crime, and we know that that's been a real issue for people in London. I think we need to really be listening to people about what they need, working with residents so that they know that there's...
I'm asking about anti-Semitism specifically, though.
Yeah, so I'm talking about Jewish residents. So obviously I represent Hackney, that's got a large Jewish population. So I've been listening to the Jewish community and making sure that they feel safe and that they've got the... I know that police have been kind of increasing their patrols and supporting people where they need that support. But it's horrific what residents are experiencing, and we need to really tackle it.
Thank you, Howard Cox.
I'm very worried about the anti-Semitism, how it's grown and grown and grown and continues to grow. I'm victim of things like death threats and things like that because I stand up for the motorists. I'm apparently a fossil fuel lover and those sorts of things. So
what's that got to do with anti-Semitism?
Well, I'm about to...
I think it's talk about the level of threat is what Howard Cox
It's the level of threat they're up against and those sorts of things. And that's the problem with it. What we need to do is break down this division, and the king of division is the London Mayor, current London Mayor.
Well, he's not responsible for anti-Semitism, is he?
No, he's divisive in splitting communities. Splitting cyclists and drivers is another one.
All right,
I think he's been good at supporting Jewish people recently, though. He's done very well. He's done very well in supporting people through this crisis.
Rob Blackie, the level of anti-Semitism in this city.
This particular incident is appalling, and it is symptomatic of a broader problem we have with anti-Semitism. And that problem is that many people think that anti-Semitism is somehow different from other forms of racism. It is just as terrible and evil as other forms of racism.
And before I let you go, sorry, 5 minutes over time, there's a question tailored for each individual of you. And I'm going to start, if I may, with you, Councillor. Jenny Jones famously served as the Green Party Deputy Mayor of London under a Ken Livingstone administration. Would you serve as Deputy Mayor under Sadiq Khan?
If he'd have me, yes, absolutely.
OK. Rob Blackie, the Lib Dems have struggled in London Mayoral elections. They haven't kept their deposit, i.e. 5% of the vote, in the election since 2008. Why are you going to make a blind bit of difference?
Well, the Conservatives aren't going to win in London. They've got a terrible
we're talking
candidate
about the Lib
and they've
Dems
given up. Yeah, and Sadiq Khan doesn't deserve to win. If people want a change on crime in particular that affects the most vulnerable in the city, they need to vote for
5+%?
I very much hope so. The polls would say significantly better than that right now.
And lastly, Howard Cox from Reform UK. Reform was previously the Brexit party. What has been good for London about Brexit?
If Brexit was allowed to take place, it would have been very good. In my opinion, actually, Brexit is good. I voted to be in the common market. I'm the only one here. 1973, I voted to go into the common market. So I'm all for working with Europe in terms of trade and that sort of thing.
My question is, what has Brexit done for London? I know you said, what could it have done then? What would have been the benefit?
I think it still hasn't been allowed to be developed as it should do. And that's a problem with politics.
But in a
politicians.
sense, what could happen that would rehabilitate it or would make it work?
Well, working with terms of trade, London trade, working with Paris, for example, those sorts of things. Making it work, working on trade. We don't have to work with laws from being
that's the whole point of the EU. Was to
no, the EU is about dictating our lives and taking control of our lives.
London's a Brexit, and can I thank you for observing tremendous discipline among the three. I do appreciate it. So, in no particular order, my thanks to Rob Blackie, the Liberal Democrat candidate, Councillor Zoe Garbett, who is the Green Party candidate, Howard Cox, who is the Reform UK candidate. Thanks for being on LBC. Grateful. And news headlines follow this.
An Israeli man has described the moment he was forced to leave a comedy show in London because he felt unsafe. Soho Theatres apologised after Liav Eitan was subjected to verbal abuse on Saturday night. Labour's suspended a second would-be MP less than 24 hours after withdrawing support for its candidate in the Rochdale by-election. Graham Jones reportedly said UK citizens fighting for Israeli forces should be locked up. The headline rate of inflation in the UK remained at 4% in January, despite predictions of a rise. Lower costs of food, furniture and household goods were offset by higher energy bills. LBC weather, most places mild and cloudy with some rain. Brighter spells further east, a high of 14 Celsius.
This is LBC.